Hi everyone, welcome to my review of Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi from 2017. Directed by Rian Johnson and of course the second film in the Star Wars sequel trilogy. So yes, we are back once again, ready to discuss Star Wars, this time around The Last Jedi. And there will be a spoiler warning for this discussion. If you haven't seen this film, I would recommend seeing it and then come back to this video, of course. And we can go from there and, you wouldn't want plot points given to you, so, because I will be getting into, in depth a little bit into this film. And, I recommend seeing the film first and then come back to this video, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments as always. So yes, with all that said, let's dig into my thoughts on this film. Certainly a fascinating film, and one that I have definitely a history with. Yes, I have a few things to say about this one, and let's just go over my thoughts on this film. Obviously, the main plot this time around follows, picks up where we left off with Rey in that sense after she visited Luke, of course, and she attempts to kind of learn the ways of the Force in this one and develop her powers, and of course get Luke to kind of aid the Resistance in their fight. And meanwhile, we have characters like Poe, Leia, of course, trying to essentially escape and stay ahead of the First Order. We have the kind of first act, immediate first act, showing the kind of the attack of the Dreadnought, and Poe basically launching that counter-attack that does defeat the Dreadnought there, but then they are forced into kind of fleeing, of course, and regrouping in that sense from the First Order after that kind of win there, you could say. And while they're fleeing, of course, Rey's learning her powers. Kylo Ren is kind of interacting with Rey throughout the film as well, and we also have Finn kind of going off with a new character, Rose. And they're kind of going off to that planet there, for a kind of a side mission, if you will, really a side quest, which I really don't get. Kind of how it kind of it is necessary, really, in the grand scheme of things, and it doesn't. Certainly, Finn is off doing his thing, and that's a real shame. But we'll get to that. That's the main kind of what's going on in this film, and let's discuss this film. Of course, when I first saw The Force Awakens, it was just one of the greatest, I've said before, cinema experiences I've ever had, and I was blown away, and I thought, wow, let's really go to town on this, with the rest of them. Let's get hyped, and I was so pleased with that film that I had so much hope as well for all of these films, including the spin-offs, but especially the actual Star Wars episodes. I thought, wow, where we go next? How are we going to develop the characters? What's going to happen? How big is the scale going to be? And all this. And for me, in a nutshell, it never lived up to The Force Awakens in that sense of what I wanted. Really just bare bones for me, and I think when I saw The Last Jedi, it wasn't in the cinema, but I watched it and I thought, okay, let's give this a go. Obviously, even in the first act, I was thinking though, what's going on here? This is off, and it felt very off, even from that first act. So many different things to talk about there. We won't be able to discuss every single detail of this film, but I was thinking, there are some things to praise. I was kind of enjoying a couple of moments in that first act, and I thought, it's good to see the characters again. I think Oscar Isaac in this film is very good, and I do think the standout is once again John Boyega. He doesn't, even though they're all the characters really, the actors are given, I think, frustrating, plots and stuff that are, a bit baffling. They do, a lot of them, give it their all and do the best they can, of what they're given in that sense. And I do really enjoy John Boyega, and he brings the energy again, the charm and the comedy. That's one of the highlights of the film is some of the comedy of these characters. But yes, I think I was noticing things were off, and I was finding myself not that engaged in even some of the action. One of the highlights of the film, I guess, is the action, but it's kind of average overall. I think there are some standout moments and visual moments, but I was just thinking, wow, this is something off. Is it just me? I've had some days where it's just, I guess, me more than the film over the last maybe 10 years. I guess kind of where I can think back to kind of thing, but. I think I was just baffled, and I was already disappointed. And by the end of the film, the first watch experience of The Last Jedi, I thought, unfortunately, I didn't like the film. Now that was a big shock to me, going from absolutely being blown away by The Force Awakens to not even managing to kind of scrape by the kind of like mark. I thought something was off there. And I've seen it 3 times now. This is my third watch, and I can say the same thing. Really, I guess I'm less kind of shocked. That I didn't like the film, but still. It's the disappointment. Overall, I do think, while this is not an awful film, and I think there's merit to the film, and I do praise those involved. Really, I think it is definitely, it would be on a list of my most disappointing films just ever. Top 10, it has to be, because I had such expectations, and it didn't even manage to become a like overall. And I do think this is a mediocre film, at best. And I think it does so much as well to kind of, for me personally, just as a Star Wars fan, how I connected to these characters. It ruins the characters for me, most of the characters, and we'll get to that. But I just think as well, one of the things is it's just overall it's quite boring to me. It's not one that I'm really that engaged by consistently. I think it's drawn out in places, and just so baffling. I've said, it's like kind of sidestepping on side quests, kind of thing, side missions. It feels like at times, and I just think, that is what I feel again. And it was kind of a struggle to get through some of this film, just because it's kind of aimless. I didn't really know where it's going. There isn't a clear narrative. Fine, it's not outlined in a clear way, but then throughout the film, the characters don't really develop. I feel to that standard. You could say Rey is developing in her own way, but it's not in the way that I would ever have thought would have happened. And it's fine to subvert the odd expectations, but in this film, I think it just is for the sake of it, and just to try and be different. And it's a real shame that it kind of takes these characters that I love, so much from the first existing characters from the originals, of course, particularly Luke, and just does something that's just so strange with most of these characters. I don't think Finn is really, the character development is not really, disappointing, but it's just what is going on with him. There's nothing to kind of do. So he isn't, kind of taken a different direction in that sense. But Poe, I think is a different character. It seems like a very different tone. He's more aggressive. His remarks to C-3PO, it's just, okay, a couple of times, it's fine to kind of be at C-3PO and, the kind of, be annoyed, at C-3PO, but, it happened, of course, in the originals. But in this film, it does it so much, and then that happens even more in Rise of Skywalker, of course. But just, I think Poe is a lot less likable in this film. He isn't bad, I think he's one of the better characters still in the film. Oscar Isaac is obviously really good in the film, but just characters like that. Luke, of course, that is the one that is the most disappointing in the way for me, personally. Of course, that is portrayed in this film, and just this grumpy kind of, lack of hope entirely, and just all over the place character, really. Very inconsistent, what he does in the film, and weird tonal moments. But yes, watching it again, I can say, I can really pinpoint, what I feel about this film. The first act, as I've said, is just a strange one. I do still feel roughly the same about that. There are some moments with General Hux and stuff, which, it does go too far with the comedy at times. It is a bit cringy and cheap. The comedy there, I think, there are a couple of moments that I do enjoy there, and generally the first act, some of the action, it's okay. I am engaged somewhat, but yeah, so much going on in the first act. I think as well, seeing seeing Leia, kind of floating across, of course, that moment there, the very iconic moment. It's moments like this that I don't really get. Okay, it could be explained elsewhere, but in the films, it hasn't really, for her to just randomly have that power, it's very off-putting. When you get to see a film, in some ways you should have things explained to you before they happen, or after, of course, and that's why it should fit the tone, and it's just, I think, one of the things about this film going through Act 1, but then also the rest of the film, is just not just the flow, but it kind of feels like a mix and match kind of film, where there's so much going on, so stuffed in there, and it doesn't all kind of mesh, and it doesn't really fit together. The tone is up and down a lot of the time between the comedy and the drama, the fantasy elements. Just I think within one scene, it kind of reminds me a bit of the Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones, where it kind of struggles with tone. But I think this one even more so because the comedy and the drama, just at times it's there and then it's there and it's back and it really annoys me at times because I'm trying to even more so get into the plot, get into the drama, the character working, and it just goes to a weird kind of moment comedy wise. There's a lot of weird close-ups in this film as well to characters, not just our main characters but random background characters. Really, I can understand putting emphasis on one of the kind of the resistance, for example, who are as we know, some of them are dying in this film, but it just feels very off, and the cutting and the way the characters are real extreme close up. It just doesn't really work for me at times. Meant to get emotionally connected to, for example, explosions and the characters dying in that first act, and it just doesn't for me work. But generally, yes. After that kind of massive attack, we have different characters kind of fleeing, of course, the First Order. But from the get-go, I think the moment for me that I just felt a gut punch really was when Luke throws the lightsaber behind him, over his shoulder. That for me was just, I nearly cried when I first saw the film. I just thought, perhaps this is it. Perhaps all my hopes for this film, for the franchise, in the next 10 years or so, which it probably will be, more than that, are kind of crushed. And that feeling, and I have never considered anything else other than just my opinion, and my connection to these films. That's all it is with any film. It's just me loving a film or disliking a film, and in a franchise seeing a sequel and just thinking, I can't wait to see where it goes, and then I'm either taken to another place again, kind of surprised or disappointed, and I cannot express my disappointment in that moment, and that's a taste of things to come going forward, and just the whole kind of attitude of this film. At times it feels like the Force itself, and the whole Star Wars lore and the mythology of this universe is kind of mocked, and it's not taken seriously enough in the right places. Now, comedy works even with around the Force itself. It even happened in the originals, of course. Genius, because comedy is key a lot of the time in sci-fi. But in this film, it's just too far, and I can't really take it seriously, and it kind of just takes me out. And it doesn't feel like a Star Wars film mostly. There are a couple of moments. But really, from the get-go, it feels like it's just taking me out. It's just knocking me over the head with the comedy, and just the lore itself. It's kind of it's just disregarded really. And we have, of course, I will say as well, the Yoda scene later on in the film. Of course, with Luke. Now, that's kind of one of the only scenes that I think this time around. It's not bad. It's just, again, it's up and down with the tone. Couldn't quite get Yoda right overall, but it's a fun enough scene. I do like some of the stuff that Yoda says to Luke, and it is kind of a warm moment. I will give it that. So, Yoda is kind of understood, at least. And I do think, there is some love and care put into that. Overall, and I do love Rian Johnson. As a writer and director, he is something really. Looper, my personal favourite of his films. Knives Out, though, great film, and I think this is definitely take those films over this. But Rian Johnson really can deliver. I just think this film, isn't a one for me overall. I think with the tone and just that second act is when things really start to become very weird, of course, and just baffling to me. Head scratching, of course. We have Finn, meeting Rose, and in that second act, of course, in the middle of the film, middle portion, they're off at the the kind of casino sequence, if you will. This massive, for me, drawn out sequence that I just think goes nowhere really. It has some moments in there that attempts messages, of course, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not really attempting to do anything for the Star Wars, for this trilogy even. Just where does it really fit into this trilogy? The purpose of this whole sequence. It's drawn out. It's very annoying and kind of hard to make out at times as well. We do have some cute moments there, but generally, this whole kind of sequence is a no for me. And Rose and Finn, of course, this kind of romance kind of developing, if you will, although it's kind of only fully hinted at in the final act. Actually, it's not. This could easily pass for one that is not really a romance, kind of portrayal here in this whole sequence. But yeah, Kelly Tran, she is, playing Rose, and we have just, I think, a lack of chemistry here, between the characters, and I'm not a fan of the actual character of Rose at all. It's not one that I enjoy, and I don't really like at all this dynamic between Rose and Finn, and I just think once again, unfortunately, Finn is given this kind of side quest, and it's a shame that he's out of the film, in that sense, from the other characters for most of it, and it just goes nowhere, and it's very an irritating sequence really. So even the action sequence there, it's just underwhelming for me personally. But yes, while this is happening, we have, of course, things developing with Kylo Ren and of course Rey. I really was not a fan for the most part of the way in which they're connecting. It could have worked, but just the way in which it's cutting between them, it's very strange. The tone here, it just feels, it doesn't feel genuine. A lot of this film, that's one of the things, and it just, this is one of the aspects here, this dynamic here, and just the way it's edited, but between the characters and things, really just completely breaking any kind of rules. Just for me, I didn't really believe in this, what's happening a lot of the time, because it's just, anything could happen now at this point, and I think Luke and Rey together could have been this kind of course, grumpy character. That could have, of course, worked, but it is just really very frustrating. Throughout the whole film for me, really, their dynamic. It's just frustrating, and I wanted it to end. Every single time, I just think, what a shame. It could have been so much more, and it's just so annoying, so frustrating, and just so depressing, really. And that's how it turned out. This whole training sequence is just a real chore for me, and it goes on and on. Of course, we have the moments, when Luke is drinking that milk. When I first saw that, and every time, but especially the first time, what the hell, what was I thinking there? I don't know. I couldn't. I thought, perhaps I was watching a different film. That was very strange, as well. And just moments where Luke is doing very strange things. Sometimes it's just funny because of how, insane it is. But that is just a moment too far. It really, that is just, the comedy doesn't work for me. Of course, in the end, we do have the kind of sacrifice of Luke. In that final act, that's where we kind of have the all-out, kind of large-scale battle sequence there, and it's just, I think, underwhelming and drawn out again. Some moments in that are enjoyable, but generally, it just doesn't work for me overall. I think the visuals to this film overall, I do praise at times. There are some good moments visually, action-wise, with some of the colours, but at times it's dull, and at times it's too much. When there's the red and whites combined, in that whole red room, that, is just, for me, too much red there. The enemies that are red, and then, in the cloaks, and then, the background is red, and nothing stands out, so it kind of just, it's a bit too much on the eyes there, everything being red at times, especially in that sequence with Rey, Snoke, of course, Kylo Ren, etc. That's just, I just thought, wow, what's going on there? Snoke in this film, in a nutshell, very disappointing. I think the fact that he's killed off in that way, it's a bit, kind of, perhaps that didn't need to happen, because then going forward, which I won't get into, it's just, yeah, it's baffling. But in this film, for some reason, I've always thought that Snoke is just quite irritating, and just very one note. Very predictable, actually, as well, with what happens, how that develops. But again, just the sequence that there are some things to take from, but generally it's just underwhelming for me. I think Daisy Ridley in this film is good, but unfortunately, really every single sequence or moment with Rey is stuff that I'm not big on. Whether that be with Luke or with Kylo Ren, or in the final act, kind of making quips, which don't really work for me. So there we go. I think that's my general thoughts on a lot of the characters, and I think the score is obviously to praise. I think at times, I have said about the visuals, there are to praise at times, but it's a very mixed bag for me. I think technically the film, is very solid in places. Other times, very baffling to me and very off-putting. And of course, the film is dedicated to Carrie Fisher. I think that's really nice because tragically she did pass away, and this is such a shame. It was very, very, very sad when I first heard this, and she does give a good performance, and I think there are some really nice moments between her and of course Mark Hamill, being the two from the originals that are left. Obviously we don't have Harrison Ford in this film, but yes, it is really nice, and I think the fact that it's dedicated to her, it was touching, definitely, and we'll just say, Carrie Fisher, absolute legend to me, and grew up watching her, of course, and a real wonderful actress, and it's at least good that we got her in this film again, we should cherish that, and I do enjoy some of the interactions between her and Luke and different characters as well. It is quite moving in that sense, in the credits, and certainly one that I do cherish, this performance, and just the wonderful Carrie Fisher. She is, always will be, legend to me. But yes, I think overall the performances, it's not really the problem. It is just the character working, and that affects everything really. And I think actors not given enough to kind of go with, just personally for me, and characters taking a complete at times U-turn from that first entry, The Force Awakens. It really baffles me, and it's very, very inconsistent, very messy, and perhaps too much of a mess to kind of solve with the Rise of Skywalker. But yes, overall, The Last Jedi for me is just a very, very inconsistent film, one that really annoys me, and is overall a crushing disappointment in this Star Wars universe. So yes, my final rating for The Last Jedi is a 53%. It's a one that's under par. It's not an awful film. I do think there are things to praise, but not enough, and too many things that just I do hate, and a few things that I hate, and too many things as well that I just dislike and think are very baffling, and just very depressing to me. It's just that, obviously, I have said this is one of the most disappointing films I've ever seen. It's not one of the worst films I've seen. It's not an awful film, a bad film, really for me. But there's so many things that just take me out of the film, or just move characters in directions that I really am not big on. And as well, just as a blockbuster film, it is boring to me. And one of the few Star Wars films that are boring actually, consistently really for me. It's just a one that I'm not engaged in. A lot of the sequences are drawn out, and it's a real shame, this one. There are things to praise: C-3PO, BB-8, Poe at times, Finn. Some of the obviously the performances and visual moments. Some of the action is fine enough, kind of engaging, but too much of the film I don't enjoy, and some of the film I really do hate. It's a shame. It's purely my opinion on this film. That's all it's ever been, and I just, as one Star Wars fan who loved The Force Awakens, just personally for me and my experience and my taste, this one is not there, and it really did change the way I view films at times going forward. Only purely in terms of expectations. So going in to a film in a franchise, there's always that thing at the back of the mind, no matter really how hyped I am, that unfortunately it could turn out like The Last Jedi. So there we go, and there are different films, worse culprits out there since, but I think just this is the turning point. Purely just being honest, for my kind of naive mind with franchises, and of course there's been worse films since and stuff, but I just think it's a turning point for me and how I view films going forward, and my expectations and my hype. There's always yeah, that kind of fear that something could turn out as disappointing as this. Just personally for me, of course, we're all different. We all have different tastes and view films differently and respond to films differently. So this is just my opinion, of course, of The Last Jedi. I do praise the film at times. There's some merit to the film, performances being one of them. Of course, Rian Johnson, I've said, is a director who I love. It's just this entry, this film, it's just not for me personally, and I think that's it. We'll wrap up. I do, think there are some things to praise about this, but overall, this is very, very disappointing to me. It's one that's very frustrating, drawn out, strange tone. The characters, it feels very messy, and just some of the things that happened in this film were just wow. I did not enjoy it at all, and I did. I was very, very shocked. How things turned out in this film. So that's my thoughts. The Last Jedi, not an awful film, but definitely very much under par, and not one that I personally enjoy as a Star Wars film, or simply as a blockbuster film. So there we go. That's my thoughts. What do you think of this film? What do you think of The Last Jedi? It'd be great to hear your thoughts on this, of course. And as always, great to discuss Star Wars in the comments. And next up will be Solo on the channel, reviewing that, and then The Rise of Skywalker, and then the ranking, which will be filmed over the next few weeks, no doubt, and up, and that'd be great to discuss as well. All your rankings and stuff, and compare, and express your love and stuff for Star Wars. So yes, as always, take care, and thanks for watching.